Good afternoon. So after those insightful words from Ann Metzler, I'm glad to welcome here Renat and Amal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get to the questions, and I do have many, I wanted to just make a link with my everyday work. You know, I'm supporting clean tech companies in Estonia and the Baltics, and our three key focuses, there's always financing, access to capital on the top of the list. So I'm really glad that we can talk about this today with those experienced panelists and try to figure out where will the money be flowing, because this will also give us an indication of what will actually get done in 5, 10, 15 years. But before we get to all of my questions, I would like to ask both of you to give a short introduction about yourself, about your activities and your vision. So perhaps we can start with you, Renat.
Sure. Should I have brought a few slides? Yes, that's good.
Yes.
Is there a clicker? Yeah. Good. So, good afternoon also from my side. I'm very glad to be here in Tallinn. And of course, for me as a climate activist, as I still call myself, it's of course an absolute privilege to have a conference in a former coal-fired power plant, which has been repurposed to this beautiful cultural hub. And I mean, I'm totally amazed by the technology down there. So, yeah, it's really great that you kept it up as a memory. Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur, and I certainly have my share of experience in looking for capital, sometimes more and sometimes less successfully. All my career has been in the broader space of climate and energy and nature. I created My Climate as the first, that was an NGO actually, in 22, which was the first European company that did carbon offsetting. I also founded South Pole, which is still today one of the largest climate companies. And the recent addition is Terra Impact Ventures, my current kind of a venture incubator. And one of our tickets, or one of our partners that we work with is an Estonian company. And of course, I'm very proud of that. It's the company eAgronom. And I'm, since about 2 weeks, the chairman of this company. It's Europe's largest soil carbon company, helping over 3,000 farmers to put more carbon into the soil. And we'll probably discuss about that. But if Europe honestly wants to reach its 2040 climate target, it has to remove carbon. And storing carbon in soil of farmers is one of the most scalable and cost-efficient ways to do so. So I think this Estonian company is on the edge of achieving something very big. And I just learned yesterday at the dinner, we did a little bingo, who can name the 10 Estonian unicorns? And we came to about 8 or so, and then we had to use ChatGPT. But keep in eAgronom is, in my expectation is correct, it's going to be added as number 11 or 12, depending on how you count. So why am I so fascinated about carbon? It's because carbon credits, which is a proxy for everything that you can do to reduce carbon, is just everywhere. It spans every thinkable industry. We counted 170 different types of projects that reduce carbon. So I think it's fair to say saving the climate is probably the most relevant business opportunity of our century. And you just can see here some spaces. We can discuss about all of them. It ranges from waste, agriculture, chemical industry, renewables, transport. Nearly no industry where there wouldn't be a potential to reduce carbon. So I went into this topic quite early and experimented with carbon credits. And now when we ask the question about where is the money going in 2040, it's interesting to first look back a little bit. In the space, and I think that's the broader topic of this forum, in the space of, let's say, sustainability, ESG, one market is very interesting because it has a lot to show us, which is the carbon market. Here is a chart of the voluntary carbon market which is one of the only markets that has been going on for the past 20 years. So there's a lot we can learn from it. You have the figures, the volumes that got traded on voluntary carbon markets from 25 to 21. And you can see this market was growing exponentially from 25 to 28. You can see these blue bars under the Kyoto Protocol. And why did it then stop the growth? Of course, because of the financial crisis, like Lehman Brothers, Greek debt crisis, the EU nearly fell apart. So it went sideways for quite a while. That's also was when the cleantech bubble burst. Some of you might remember, 25 to 2010 were the big years of cleantech. A lot of investors went in, and many people got burned and stayed away for about 10 years and said, no, I don't want to hear about cleantech anymore. I lost my money already. So the Paris Agreement came into force 2015. Not much happened, neither on the carbon side nor on the investment side. Because, of course, at the same time, Donald Trump came into place, other problems came out, not much happened. But then, all of a sudden, in 2019, there was an exponential growth. That was when all of a sudden climate was back in shape, and COVID came, and people said, we have a health crisis, we have a climate crisis. So those were basically, all of a sudden, the movement came back. But very soon after, it crashed again. And the question is, why is this? Why are the climate topics, climate tech, clean tech, why they're always rising? People are super excited, invest a lot of money, and then it crashes again. And I think the answer to this question, why that happens, is that this graph that I think you should all remember, be aware of, this is the hype cycle. So many technologies undergo these hype cycles. You start with an interesting technology, you get early developers, early movers, and the media gets in, and then of course private equity comes in. Everybody, they don't understand what they're talking about, they come in, they jump on the same bandwagon, until then all of a sudden it peaks, and then the media is against you, first things start failing, some people start losing money, and then all of a sudden it goes down to the valley. But that is not the end of the graph, of course, because after this hype cycle, after this disillusion, we call this the scope of enlightenment. That's when you find the real teams, the people who survived the crisis, and my argument would be that dip there is the best moment for anybody to invest in technologies. Because if you're brave enough to pick up those assets which have been stranding in the disillusionment, that's where you can make money. So what does it take to climb the slope? Just a few points. I think you need a product that solves a problem beyond ESG. We have heard this on the previous panel already. It's not good enough just to be green. It must be a product that solves a problem. Current interesting topics are security, resilience, efficiency. These are main topics. If your product is aligned with those, it has a market. AI is, of course, a topic we cannot not have on the stage. I would argue it's either EA-driven or EI-safe. So either your product is clearly EA-driven or it's undisruptible by AI. If it's neither of the two, you might run into troubles in a few years from now. Then I keep mentioning this, the team, a stable, experienced, hardworking team which is able to go to plan B, and the ability to adapt fast and handle complexity. It's not a secret, we're living in an extremely complex world. So I think if you ask where does the money go, and we talk about growth capital, I think currently these are the characteristics how you can recognize what is successful. So with this, I end my short introduction. One last slide I have for you, because it's a bit of a side topic, but we were wondering actually, why are these carbon markets, why have they undergone already about 3 hype cycles? They're coming up and coming down and coming up and coming down. Keeping in mind that carbon finance is supposed to be $1 trillion business. It's supposed to be really big because it's the only way, if we have heard before, like Nigeria, India, Mexico, in all those countries, there are so many opportunities, but without carbon finance, they can't be unlocked. And we wrote a book about that, which you might be interested in, to explain what are some of the paradoxes that hinder those markets. Perhaps we can also talk a little about that, because as much as we're all optimists and growth concentrated people, I think it's also important to be very realistic of what's actually not working, what's not going wrong, and what lessons we can learn. So with this, I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Renat.
Well, thank you so much. I have learned so much, and I'm not going to compete with you in talking about climate or talking about everything that you've said, because you've researched this, you've written a book about it. But I'll tell you where I come from. First of all, I'm very honored to be with you here today. I flew all the way from Saudi Arabia. This is my first visit in Estonia, and I can tell you just by coming here and landing here, I can hear that and feel the freshness, in the country. And Helen, who picked me up from the airport, first thing we said, just breathe. And I can see, how clean is the air, and that's beautiful. But you can also feel, as we're walking and going around the city, that it feels new, and it feels modern. And there is a very sense of beauty, in all around. And that doesn't happen, out of nowhere. And maybe the part that I want to talk about now is my background actually comes from education. And I moved 25 years ago. I started my journey in education all across, boards, from elementary, kindergarten, high school, managing school, all the way to building my track into financial stream. And I manage a venture capital company that is a US company out of the Middle East, headquartered in Riyadh. We started this work in 2020. My job is to find talent, really figure out if what they're building is scalable. Is there anything that I can do in terms of business development, connecting them? Is it about money? Is it about this and that? And there's a lot of relationships in what I do, and climate. Because everybody is trying to reach certain goals. And we do reach goals as well, through putting this whole formula together. But I wanted to draw lines between those different angles. What is so similar, and how do we all build something achievable as we talk about the goals of 2040? I wanted to focus on three things. One, builders. You want to look at where money will flow. Builders' economy and builders' mindsets. Instead of bringing actually technologies from outside, we're building them here. We are able, we have the talent, we have the universities, we have everything, let's build it. And how do we build it in an efficient manner? How do we really link it to our goals of the economy? That is something that is actually very known about Estonia today. And that's what we're trying to do actually in Saudi Arabia. And I wanted to draw that we as investors, venture capitalists, we look for the next shiny thing, the next billion-dollar company. Right? This is what we do. We look for the next mega cities. Where is it being built? There must be capital and money actually in these places. But at the end of the day, these companies and these countries that will attract the money are not the ones with mega cities. They are the ones that will learn, the keys of how it was built. How do we really build the code? As we build mega cities, we tried in Saudi Arabia to build the code towards, what does it take to build the supply chain? What does it take to actually build more efficient plants? What does it take to reduce energy and do this and that? And we're a country that comes, from oil. Years and years of that. So changing the mindset, in the government and along all the people, it takes a very long time. And I think this is really quite interesting to look at. We need to focus on digitalization, which Estonia have actually done magnificently. And for us today, it took us actually, quite a long time to get to that, but we're getting there today. And I think it just takes the will, to figure how to build these stuff actually together today. Option 2 is and the next one is the compression. We are known to be doing things fast. We are known to launch a lot of things actually in Saudi. We call it digital compression. How do we really reach from a place? In 2018, we used to consider everything in Saudi as, cash is king, right? Today, after 5 years, 80% of all transactions that are done in retail are actually done digitally. How do you do that? You cannot do it all the way just by telling people shift to digital. It takes learning, it takes awareness, it takes education. There's a lot of actually initiatives that was done by the government, sandboxes that was availed actually to help startups to launch their own and sprint and make mistakes. And there's what we call the most beautiful thing, grace period. Let them do it. figure out the mistakes, and then after that we will correct. So there was a lot of these things that was done in Saudi to go through this. And, as we're doing this, there's so much change and shift that's happening within the fabric of the society, obviously. And I think this is actually quite the ground root. And what Saudi is being known about today is about skipping. And that's what brings me to the digital compression, meaning we skipped credit card. You will laugh. People didn't have credit cards. Well, I bet you most of the population didn't have credit cards. But now, more than 80% of the population uses digital wallets. So there is sometimes something that we need to not go through all the steps. We could skip, and we could go faster to that. We did not go through the grid in solar energy, but we're actually going to distribute solar immediately today. So there was a jump and again a leap, towards that. And I'm a big believer in what the role of technology companies will do towards skipping this, and this is where the opportunity is. And as we're doing that, we're actually growing our climate interest in one way or another. And I think the last point that I will talk about and wrap up everything together is the laboratory phase. Right? And what do we mean actually by that? We, as a region in Middle East and North Africa, we've been known to be consumerist first. Very extractive, in many ways. Things were provided out there. We're admitting that. We're saying this is how it used to be. But now come and check the countries and see what's happening within all of the economy, where there is build, 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 and everybody wants to look up what's the scientific approach behind that. Can I localize it? What are the type of IPs that I can actually push forward? And the climate conversation comes along, and the government is asking the question, so now it's time for the population to come closer and really bridge that gap. So there is so much here. We used to be known for exporting only oil, and we're saying we're hopefully today known for exporting resilience, which I believe Estonia is a master of that. And we've had this nice dinner yesterday where we're talking about all these resilience stories and models that can be actually shared. And there's collaborative rooms. Why am I mentioning all these three stuff and not talking about the elephant in the room today? Basically, the reason I'm talking about the builder's mindset, the compression of the digital journey, and the laboratory phase that we're all going to build, what approach that we followed, we can actually read all the headlines, and we can say a lot about the headlines of the countries around climate. But Saudi is trying to do this through economic transformation and through behavioral change. When the metro was introduced, everybody said no one will use it. All these billions that were spent, everybody said that. You cannot find the spot empty today. All the young people left, their cars, it's like, it's faster, it's more efficient. So I think the key in doing that shift and creating new markets is understanding behavioral changes, consumers' trends. If I want something cheaper, offer me the cheap so I can be more friendly. Offer me what's more efficient so I can shift easily. So that's what Saudi is trying to do, is like, how do I link that change with what is useful actually for people? And hopefully we talk more about details here, but I just wanted to give a note about what's happening really today in Saudi and how we're extracting the climate agenda out of the economical movement that we're doing today. And hopefully next week in the Circular Economy Forum in Saudi, if anybody's going to be there, more to be talked about. But looking forward definitely to dig deeper into venture and achieving those goals.
Thank you so much, Amal. You both actually gave a pretty good overview already of the key drivers and trends that we're going to be seeing going forward. But I wanted to drill down a bit deeper into the technology level and the sectoral level, what is really going to be changed. You see the capital moving today. We don't have a crystal ball, but chances are where we put our money, this is where we'll grow something new, something better. What are the key changes that we're going to see technology-wise and on a sector level in the next 15 years?
Well, honestly, it's what I mentioned today. So for example, when we first started investing in general, in 500 Global or in the region, everything was about software SaaS, right? That was what was working, really figuring out, what's sustainable, what's recurring, and all of this stuff, and it worked. And that goes in line with digitization. As corporations, government are going fully digital, you start seeing the need for all of these solutions. The way we're evolving now, as we can't ignore, the power of AI and everything that's happening, but with AI there comes, energy, cost, on that. I think we as a region, and the globe cannot afford to make more mistakes like this. With every data center that we build, you need to think of what's happening, within the energy emission as well at the same time. So I think the question today, any company that will be solving that, anything that talks about the emission, and what will happen and how can I actually recycle something like this. The second thing is basically what are the most efficient solutions around, energy in general. We are looking at that as a country, we are looking at it even as investors. And when we're talking about 2040, that's like 10, 15 years, right? We're expecting to see more evolution. To your point, Renat, you were talking about, let's invest today because these are companies that takes a long time. These are not companies that develop in 2 years or 3 years. All the R&D, all the IP, companies will take time. There is POC, there is technology readiness level. Here is where we need governments to start, and maybe that's another point, to interject, and subsidize and really give that, because us as investors will not put the money for research. It's not designed like that, not because we're bad people, It's just the venture capital money is not designed for this at the early stage. Once the experimentation is done, then it comes. So I do believe energy is definitely one of the biggest and clean, tech in general. AI, there is no escape around this. It's just how to make these models lighter. I was speaking to a founder in the region. He told me, nobody's thinking what will happen after 3 or 4 years after starting an AI company, because all the money they're getting today as free credits. Right, OpenAI is giving free credits, everybody's giving free credits, and that's not impacting the economical, status of the company. But imagine what will happen after that. Anyone who will solve something like this and really create, a platform that's closer to reality will be good. Financial technology, because it creates inclusion, will still be an important thing. And as we worry about big problems in the world, these are going to become more granular and will become more used and will become more attractive to actually venture capitalism, in my view.
Yeah, so I think that was a very good overview. And if I may add, and if you think about the hype cycles, right? Right now, AI is kind of undoubtedly the top topic. And it's disrupting many things already. And if you mentioned SaaS models, who needs a SaaS model at all if generative AI is actually solving the problem for you without it?
Exactly.
So whole industries in that sense are going to be out of the market. So, but at the same time, it's hyped, right?
Sure.
As a lot of money is already in the system, and not all of those AI applications can survive either.
That's true.
So if you want to take a contrarian's view, what I think is now quite interesting right now is companies who actually have real client access.
Yeah.
At some point, the question is, do you reach your end user?
Yeah.
And whatever the company is doing right now, if they can prove that they can reach customers and customers basically they can engage, they will be able to adapt as well. AI might come, they might just get more efficient by improving their processes. And if I look at the landscape right now in VC and in private equity, a lot of people have invested in the last hype cycle, haven't got their money back. So a lot of startups to Series A are currently struggling to find money. And if you have the stomach to be a contrarian, I think for many of them it's actually right now a good moment to get in, because many others are not. I think on that level you find underpriced assets these days that will make you quite happy going forward.
Yeah, I think just to actually add to this, I do agree, but the part where I disagree the most is if we wanted to come that early, if I'm not sure that this is going with the agenda, of countries that we're investing in. So let's say if I'm putting money in Egypt or in others where The regulations are not yet in my favor. They're not matching, let's say, the economical directions of the country and all of. So I think there is a box ticking that needs to be done in order to come that early. And we've done it. We were discussing this. We've actually done and invested in 2 early stage companies, in climate. The only issue, you need to help in the lobbying. You need to help in talking to corporations. You need to help in facilitating the path. So you're going to get out of your shell as a VC towards becoming a lobbyer and part of the change. And here, I would say you must have some belief, towards these companies and the will to go and really back them and say that this is something that is going to work. And part of it, we started to collect money from other parts of the world that cares about it, because it's not necessary, it's so mature in that region. So I think this argument is absolutely correct in the sense, it ticks some of these boxes for us to be able to justify it to our LPs as well.
It's an excellent point you're making, Amal. It's actually about the investment horizon that you have, and usually VCs look at, up to 7 years, right? And looking at hardware, deep tech, clean tech, it takes 15 years minimum to get first revenue.
Yeah.
So is it only the task of the government to bridge this gap, or is there something that the investors can do and change themselves as well in the way they function at the moment?
I think we do need to change. We definitely need to change and evolve, and that's the part that I'm seeing. And maybe in 500 Global in particular, we consider ourselves mostly, companions rather than just VCs. Some of the agendas that we've done, some of the money we've got is from some of the sovereign funds in certain countries. So we do have a developmental angle as well. We do get asked to, justify and give lobby. Part of my work, and you will probably not expect, 20% or 30% sometimes of the month is only going to government entities, to actually corporations, to meetings, just to plant a new idea. Just to say that this is where we see the technology going, this is where we see the future, and we want to actually be the ones helping the founder to figure out that this is actually efficient from a financial point of view. The issue is, when I worked at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, we worked with a lot of engineers, brilliant, amazing minds, but there was a lot of focus towards developing more technologies, doing more research work, and very little in commercialization. There is a gap, which I think if there isn't enough, VCs that are willing to bridge that gap, help them to find, we were talking about finding the right CEO for grade 4 engineers, that just want to build, right? And figure out the economic partners for it. I remember a story of a company that I worked with at an early stage. They developed, sensors for changes in the weather. That was 15 years ago in a university. They stayed in the lab for 5 years. Developing that device, never showed it to a customer, never. They just thought that we're going to keep developing and find the latest technologies. When they joined the accelerator, the first thing we did, we took them and put them in a meeting and said, let's try to sell it. Let's try to see how much will they pay for this. They sat in the meeting. First answer they got from the municipality is, we do have these devices that we paid millions of dollars for. It's massive, it's big, it's not as small and nice like yours, but we're not replacing that. Today. So they went back and it's like, oh my God, what happened? We built the best technology. They don't understand. I said, it's not they don't understand. It's not that. There is so much you need to know. Who are you selling for? Who's the customer? What's their motives? Why are they doing this? And the price, what are they replacing? And it took such a long time to get that. Why not think commercially and drive the technology from there? That's the role that we're trying to play in some of the universities actually today. And by the way, they're doing well. They're in 7 countries today, as they shifted this. But what they did, they shifted the device to a complementary device to existing infrastructure. You need this small shift. And that's also part of the evolution of VCs, I believe.
And I think it's also important, since we talk about elephants in the room. I mean, we've heard it already in the video before, right? There are actually 2 elephants in the room. And elephant number 1 is that China is absolutely doing industry policy. And they absolutely do fund projects like Novolt. I think in China, it probably wouldn't have failed so suddenly, because some government would have said, I'm actually bailing them out. I'm perhaps replacing the CEO, do whatever I need to do, restructure this and that, bring better engineers in, whatever. But this is not going to fail. It's too big to fail. We want that. I'm quite sure it wouldn't have happened in China. While in the US, and that's the second elephant, you have different-minded venture capitalists and private equity who are willing to take much, much riskier, much long-term and more long-term bets than we have in Europe. And then that's an elephant we have to be mindful of. And what can governments do, right? So I'm actually also working for the Swiss government as an innovation council. And when I started that job 8 years ago, I was shocked to see that 100% of all the funding can only go to the research institutions. There's not a single Swiss franc that goes into the companies themselves. Why is that? That's ultimately, if you want to push companies, you have to have those instruments. So what I think could be, for example, an interesting instrument from a government perspective is loan guarantee funds. So that you say if a company is able to get a loan at the bank, but it's so they're convinced they have the KYC, everything in place, but the bank is just not quite sure that the government partly guarantees the default and kicks the bank over the line to actually give them the loan. Or matching funds. The government could come in and say, I'm willing to give you a grant, but only under the condition that you're convincing the VC to de-risk. So those instruments, I think, are really important if you want to kick these two elephants.
Yeah, I think this is super important, and you're spot on this, actually, because in Saudi, what happened when they looked at the vision and what has been really not moving fast enough in terms of the economical goals, so they looked into industrial, kind of infrastructure. They looked into biotech. They looked into all of these things. You probably in the news you only hear about Humane and about all of these, but there are other smaller companies that are working really on these stuff. So what they did is exactly that. It's that funds that co-matches, or de-risks VCs like us, at the beginning, in order to take that risk at the beginning. Because especially in early stage, you're going to actually do a bigger pool. Maybe 500 has an extreme different way because we do between 25 to 30 companies a year. So our profile risk is much higher. We come way earlier. We work with the founders. So the model is different. But the de-risking one enabled, at the first year of starting that fund of fund, 40 funds to be established in Saudi. And now they have, I think, more than 300 in general. So it works, and some of these funds have already given returns. And I think this is another part, which is how much are we telling the story with numbers about a certain country? Does the world know what we're doing? How do we who's the world? Is the world regulators? Is the world, other founders? Is the world other countries to actually work with us, And that's massive, by the way. And it helps us. And I'll tell you, with all the reforms and changes that happened in Saudi, it served us as VCs. Because today, I don't struggle to bring a VC from the US or actually from Europe and show a certain initiative and show that the goals of the country are actually being met. This is long term. Second thing, there is depth in the market. So it's about attracting them, bringing them on the ground to see, to feel, to hear, and to believe, in order for us as VCs to have all the benefits of co-investing and really getting international money into the companies, which we started to see, by the way, in the last 2 years. Like, if you talk to me about 7 or 10 years ago, it was really not a thing that you see an international VC putting money in a Saudi company. Today, it's all over the news, the amount of companies, and you're talking with $50 to $100 million investment that was put, mainly the ones that we've seen in financial technology, actually, and in the lending space. Those are really growing really big. But yeah.
And this, by the way, is in my opinion, a very special situation for Estonia, because I think unicorns per capita, I think Estonia is absolutely off the charts. But people don't know. I think few people outside Estonia know about that. So I think it's important for Estonia, if it's a small country, to make more noise about that success, because that's ultimately, that's the dream material for VCs. If you know that, and at some point it becomes a pattern, right? Because if you have successful entrepreneurs, these people will give back to the country. They will invest again in startups. So there's a whole ecosystem that is out there, and so I think it's important that more people outside of Estonia know about this success case actually here.
Agree.
You know, Estonians, I think we're historically bad at self-marketing. We're very shy about that, but it's true that we do have something that we call the Skype mafia. So Skype was the first unicorn, and then around that we got a lot of spin-offs from first employees, also the capital from the founders.
Yeah.
So it does function as an ecosystem. But I wanted to come actually to another elephant in the room. We're talking a lot about the green premium, and is it dead? Is it still alive to some extent? How do you see it? What makes a clean tech or any green project or company investable? And you know, looking also into the future, even if it is today, then at what point would you expect it to be competitive at market terms?
So that's one of the topics that we are dissecting in the book, because I was asking myself this question. If I want to be very provocative, to a certain degree, you even see a negative green premium. And I was wondering, why is that? And a few things went wrong, and we have to correct those. One is that for some reason, and it took me a while to understand this, if you are, let's say, the fossil fuel industry, and you just don't like all those green initiatives,
Yes.
and you cannot deny climate change anymore, what can you then do? And this, of course, they did that. It is to argue that green must mean expensive. Green must mean a premium. Green must mean costs. And that is something that has sunk into all our collective brains and cannot be wiped out anymore. And it's actually damaging. Because what it does is, if you come out to a conference and you say, I'm an impact investor, do you think that people will like that a lot? The question will be, oh, and how much money do I lose if I invest with you instead of a classic investor? So actually, it's something, it sounds good, but actually, to be honest, due to the situation, actually, it has become something really negative. And so what we're arguing for is that that green premium must be much more technically robustly defined, for example, in form of a carbon tax, or in form of an obligation to basically pay the price per ton of CO2. So that green premium is not something voluntarily I give because I'm a good man with a good heart, but something that is just baked into the system. And it becomes part of the decision-making, that then it could work. And just one last point, we call this the voluntary paradox.
Yeah.
We have seen that precisely those companies which went ahead and said, I'm having a science-based target, or I'm going net zero, I'm going climate neutral, those were the companies who got attacked for greenwashing. While other companies who did nothing at all, they basically, nothing happened. And that doesn't work like that. I mean, so, yeah.
It's very interesting, because actually there's a lot of talking about that in the clean tech sector, and the fear is that if we do say that there cannot be a green premium, then we will only put money into the already mature technologies, but yet looking at 2040, we know that we're not going to reach the Paris climate goals if we don't adopt new technologies that are still in the labs. So what can be done to finance those things, and how can we engage more private capital into it?
I can share an experience when I worked actually in KAUST, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. You can look it up. It's a 15-year-old research facility in Saudi. And basically, we used to work with all of the researchers, as I mentioned, in the lab. The very first thing, if I don't want them to continue just research, which has to actually cost the country a lot in order to do that research, we came up with a department which is existent all around the world, sponsored research. So for example, one of the experiments, like going to Aramco. Aramco actually does the oil and gas, the pipes, right? What is the biggest thing that any oil producer fears? Any guesses? That it stops, that you have to stop it and shut it down for a period of time. How much does that cost you per second and per minute? So basically what they created is these robotics, right, that goes into these, kind of pipes and does the inspection, gives the early corrosion signs, give all of these stuff. And regardless, that's the complete opposite of what we're trying to say today, but it's an example about sponsored research, right? So they actually funded the POC, which is the proof of concept at the beginning during the risky time for a VC, a venture capital. A venture capital want to come after 7 or 8 technology readiness level, which is quite advanced. That means they tested, they deployed, they have a client. It's like you get it on a golden plate, which is a huge opportunity. Very little that comes before that. What's happening today in KAUST, back in the days it was all sponsored research, government, mandate, look at this. There was Boeing, other companies as well that had problems, and they give it to the lab, and the lab will try to solve it. Today what's happening at the early stage, VCs are being introduced at an early stage to meet these companies. Now that the technology is actually becoming more clear, people understand it more, the awareness is actually more known, they talk to them early, and KAUST themselves, they fund. So they have this risk fund, that actually invests in these companies. So the VC feels more like, oh, there is, multi-billion-dollar whatever fund that will definitely come and support because this is needed in the country, why not go and participate? So this is a second one. The third one is what we do today, which is lobbying and finding international research center to de-risk these companies as well, to try to find more use studies and cases in other parts of the world to apply, right? But I think sponsored research is one of the earliest, methods that are done in research universities that really helps a lot to cover at least the risky part, because the biggest risk in any early technology on intellectual, actually property, it may not work in reality. In a software company, it's easy to tweak and change and like all of that, but a device that doesn't work, that's cost, that's spent, if you just spent a few millions on it. So I think if that was de-risked, VCs will come. Because everyone I know today is asking, Amal, do you have deep tech companies? I was like, what are you interested in? What's your capital like? What's your ticket size like? So I think the interest is building up, but the problem is like, how do we do it? So sponsored research is one, co-actually investment. The third one that's becoming really big in Saudi, family offices, for example, that cares about, certain industries. And they want to know more. They're willing to take the risk and put it. We have family offices that started to invest in small companies today. They incubate, they allow them to pilot, they get into actually their ins and outs, and they become part of that ecosystem. Banks today are actually investing in companies. Who would have thought the most heavy regulatory systems would be willing to give their APIs, put the money in companies, and allow them actually to be part of that? And again, that goes back into, that question, which is the de-risk. For me, the minute I know the bank put their money, it's like a no-brainer, because we always want to do it. But when I know that there is interest, it becomes a de-risking mechanism, obviously.
So de-risking is the name of the game. But let's now come back maybe to the Estonian level. And more broadly, Europe. You both brought out the fact that we are competing in a global economy. China is clearly ahead in mature clean technology categories. And Mettler also touched on this point. And the question is, how can Europe, and especially a small country like Estonia, be a leader on a global level in clean tech? Anne mentioned the coalitions of the willing. Could that work? Is there anything else we could do? What needs to be done?
I think it's a lot about the right niches to find. There's so certain things like solar PV panels. It's very difficult to disrupt that. This is so big in China. Yeah. So that's very difficult. Or like drones, very difficult. But then there are niches that absolutely work in place like this. For example, a good friend of mine runs a drone company that produces in Sweden, that they produce Swedish drones. And why is it interesting? Because the Swedish army wants drones which are 100% manufactured in Sweden, and heavy load drones, like massive things. So that niche is undisruptible because basically the privacy of the privacy reason. So I think it's all about finding those niches that, if the elephant stands here, you don't want to just walk to the elephant, but you want to find a path around that elephant. And of that I'm actually still today, if I travel the world, I still believe that in terms of creativity, in terms of ideas, in terms of thinking around the corner, in terms of coalition, in terms of understanding different teams and putting them together, Europe is still leading. Why? It's because we have a different education system that values that type of thinking. So if we can play that card, I think we can actually walk around the elephant, but we have to play that card deliberately. Starts with education, at schools, more entrepreneurship programs at schools, more trying out, and also perhaps more eagerness and willingness to do something. If there's one thing I'm sometimes a bit scared of is, at least in Switzerland, I don't know if it's in Estonia, perhaps it's a bit less so because you're so close to Russia, but Swiss people have become a bit lazy. They like to, just the government is providing this and that is just not good enough. I think you should provoke that pride again in getting things done and use that creativity for something good.
Amazing.
That card can be played deliberately, not just so happens.
I think, just to top that, you've said it really nicely, but I always like to play on the strength. What have we done so great, so big, so powerful that we were probably the only ones in the world that have done this, and we cracked the code somehow in it, right? And can that code be exported or actually be shown to others? You mentioned education, and I read about the Tiger Leap, initiative and what has been done and all the education that has been done. There's many parts of the world that's looking to crack that code. Somebody mentioned, I think, in Africa, I'm not sure if he's here, that, by 2050 there will be, most of the population will be like teenagers, 2040 will be in Africa. That is mind-blowing. And then the lovely lady, from high school in the morning, she was actually talking passionately, about the change they want. But again, by 2040, you're talking about people that are super young. So whatever we're feeding into the education is the build of the future. And I don't know how, governments are missing out on that. I just can't even visualize that, they are the ones that are gonna lead and we're building somewhere else, right? Where most of the funds actually needs to go there because they can build so young. There's no longer a limitation on a 6-year-old that can actually do something that could impact the world today. So how do we really build on that? And I do believe you do have some experiences here that you can export and share that narrative, in the world through digitization, through the use of technology, and that's definitely one thing. A second thing I think I would extract it from, a lovely dinner that I was part of yesterday. I feel the passion towards creating, even cities, that are self-sufficient, that are areas that are actually reliant on resources. That is super inspiring, but also not a lot of people know how to crack the code in that. Is this about property? All right, well, in the GCC, we're awesome about building properties and high-rises, and all of these great, but what can you do more? And what can you do more at an infrastructure level? And not a lot is being done in infrastructure and technology, and I do believe that Estonia have a lot, like I've been reading, in the past week, and I can see there is so much, but I want to touch it, and yesterday I was saying, is there models that we can look at? Is there ways that we can say, you can scale this? It worked in Estonia on that scale, but you can actually take it to the next notch level. Let's try to do something together, and see how that works out. So I do believe that building on strength is not the only way, but it is one good way, because when you talk about it, you know it so well. You're not reinventing something that hasn't been done, right? And the third thing, what is the biggest problem that, the GCC is struggling from? You'll be surprised. It's availability of talent. We have people that say most of their software engineers are actually either in Ukraine or in Estonia, or this is what I'm hearing from the companies. It's the biggest thing today. They actually find the software engineers in other parts in Europe, not, in the GCC or in India, right? So what can be done, in terms of, again, collaborative approaches? What has been done right? What can be replicated? That's another major opportunity. And if you ask every minister and everybody in the Gulf, they will bring the talent. Go through all of, everybody will talk about the talent. That's why Saudi is doing a lot in grassroots today when it comes to education, but how many years would that take, to get and help, knowing that Saudi is attracting technology, attracting the investment of the world to that part of the world with all of its geo-economical, issues. It is becoming a hub, and people are curious Maybe really not everyone believes, but everyone who visited started believing, right? But again, we need to resolve for that. So those are like 3 areas off the top of my head that I can think there could be so much to be publicized in terms of story and in terms of collaborative efforts, in order to take this forward. And these are all important things today. I know when we talk about climate, it's important for us and for the future of our humanity, but those are like to be implemented today, and it will help you achieve the goals, of 2040 and other goals as well. So I think there's something definitely there.
Thank you, Amal, and thank you, Renat, as well. If you allow me to wrap this up with 3 words, I think what came out of this panel discussion is what we need for the green transition and for capital to support it by 2040. It is energy, it is youth, and it is de-risking, right? I wanted to leave the time, and if we're allowed to take one question from the public.
Yes, there is exactly one question. Any predictions about the sustainable finance markets globally? A lot of backtracking on ESG, sustainable finance commitments recently. How soon will it catch up again to what is needed from a climate perspective?
I have one word for you. Any company, I'll say, make it commercially viable. Any sustainable company that comes and pitches impact to me, and if you tell me it's not going to make money down the line, don't pitch it. It's not going to survive. Don't use the word sustainable to get away from unit economics. Don't use the word impact to say, I'm fixing the world. The world needs money to be changed. You need to actually make it viable. So if down the line you don't see a source of revenue, I'm telling you, the government will not fund it forever. Philanthropists will not fund it forever. People that love the world will not fund it forever. You gotta be in control. And the way to be in control is to build viable economic models that will make you do good in the world. That's basically how I look about it. Is it going to pick up? Man, it's picking up. There is funding. It's just don't try to sell a story that doesn't actually stand itself and does not fund itself. That's the answer that I would say. Some may not like it, but honestly, every company that I love and I want to see them make a change, this is the first thing we work on. Let's see how can we make money out of this model and then help you really see the path. We can cover the proof of concept, but we want it to survive.
And if this is all true, assuming this is true, and I assume it is true, as we discussed before, that green, what used to be called the voluntary ESG, that must be baked into the system. Without that, it could, for example, let's just keep in mind all those 2040 climate neutrality targets. The EU, if the EU has set this target, they have to show us the measures how they're going to achieve this target. And that's going to send signals to the economy as to what technologies will get the appropriate support for that. And there, I come to you and I say, look, there is an ESG component, but it's backed by this government target, and you will listen. If I just say, oh, it's green and you should be a good person, you will not listen.
Yes,
so that is the difference. So therefore, we need this regulatory clarity, which I'm pulling my hair off, that the EU is jumping back and forth and is not making up its mind. That is just not good enough. It has to be, whatever the rule is, it cannot change every year. It should be one set of rules that provides clarity to the investors.
I agree, and if I add to this, which is an amazing one, which is baked in the policy itself, this is amazing, because I know no regulator will come and shut it down tomorrow by one verdict, right? The second thing is, are we designing for consumer? Like, if I am coming with this new, initiative that, so for example, every economy that tried to have people to recycle their bins, right? It's either that it was actually something that they do long time ago, or there are places that put bins in front of houses and expected everybody to do it, right? This is, or invest in something that looks beautiful and it looks, quite fancy. No one is doing it. Because you can't just teach people and tell them, do this, unless you put, punishments and incentives maybe on the other side. Again, designed for the consumer, and design in something that gets them excited, that gets them moving, and then after that, you actually will figure out the commercial model. Easier said than done, but I've seen it work. I wish that we can have, a time to talk about the companies and how they did it, but there is ways. I'll give a small example, and I know we're probably running out of time. We have a company that cares about surplus food that is left on shelves. In some of the countries, it's actually just thrown. Let's say 4 o'clock is the time where the food expires. You take it and you just throw it in a bin. There's not much is happening. What they did is they figured out the categories. They sell it with a cheaper price from this hour to this hour. So in order to clear it and not throw it and not give it for a waste. Simple, right? They built an app. All the young people would love to have something for a good buck at that time. If you do it pickup, you also reduce 20% out of that. It's done in UK, it's done in Saudi now. We had to coach the people on how to actually show the model, the financial model, instead of saying we're doing good only. And that was the driver of the founder. So again, it's baked in the policy, commercially viable, driven by people, designed for the people, can be a golden formula.
And regulatory stability and ambition.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the audience.